In order to have an in-camera solution to explain something visually, basically drawing things, without recording a second screen and then splicing it together very fancily, I searched for a solution. And one of these solutions could be that I would have something like this here. I actually use this in order to very quickly draw things. The problem is I don't want to waste paper. So now the next iteration would be to just take this and make it digital. The problem with this is it is an additional device that I have to maintain and that also binds capital. So wouldn't it be nice if you would have also just the haptics of normally drawing on something, but without the downside of constantly throwing away paper? And I figured it is actually not that hard. Many people have thought about this problem before, and this is where these charts actually were made. Commonly referred to as flip charts. Now you can see. Now what the flip chart consists of is a surface to write on, either very white or bright, and then having a darker marker, or the other way around, but usually it is white, I guess. So now, in order to simulate something like this, I figured I could just use this, then put it on the first paper here, or potentially also more papers, because then the whole thing is more stable. Now, very slowly drawing it over the main thing. And now, ideally, you have a non-permanent marker which you can draw on. Additionally, what we also need is a cloth in order to then take off the color again. So let's see how this works, how well this works. So wouldn't it be nice to have a flip chart? Of course, now the problem I am having is that I would either need to write in mirror or, and also I'm realizing this marker is probably not the best in terms of visibility, but, and I also don't really know if this it's actually pretty bad. The problem is I do not have a permanent marker in black as of now in this thickness. I only have non-permanent markers that are way thinner. What also doesn't help is that this is a text marker and not a permanent marker. So let's try this one. It is in red, and I think you can also wipe it off. I will actually see. So now, in order for this to be actually good workflow, of course I need to think about whether it makes sense to write in mirror. Either I can do this over time and it would be a skill I probably would have to learn, or whenever I explain, I just write things down on the flip chart. And now I'm also realizing that this doesn't work that well, as you probably can potentially see. So what you could do is you could move your camera angle in a way that at least the viewer can somehow experience what you're actually writing. And ideally now, this would not look like this, because it looks very bad and nobody can see what I'm writing. So a potential improvement would be, I actually don't know if there are markers that are made for these surfaces. Not for flip chart surfaces, but for actual foil. And for this reason, this project, at least as of currently, has kind of failed. Of course, I could potentially draw something like a graph and then say, this is the relationship and here is the thing you want to look at. But it would not be very visible. Another potential problem is, at least for me currently, I am usually using the blurred background feature, which usually blurs the background, even though currently it doesn't, because whenever I hold something into the camera, it should actually also be visible. So now if I blur the background and it actually focuses on my face, it usually has a problem of focusing on something I hold into the camera. Now it doesn't anymore, or not that much anymore, because Samsung actually improved this and extended the focus feature not only on the face, it is now not only based on the face, but it is also at least partially based on objects. Now let's at least see how well you can wipe this off. This is just a normal cloth without any kind of soap in it, and it seems to work reasonably well. So the potential next step for this small project of mine would be to try different pens, because I want to find out if this kind of is something that works. I mean, you can write with permanent marker on something, and for the sake of actually trying this out with permanent marker, I will now try this out with permanent marker. And very conveniently, I also have permanent marker that actually has kind of this stylized feature. That is, it is a permanent marker that has corners. If we compare a normal round permanent marker, or just a marker, with something that has corners actually, like this one, and again, the focus feature on Samsung still doesn't work well enough, so therefore here it is, up close. It is actually a rectangle. So now, the nice thing about this being a rectangle is the fact that if you write, you constantly create different kinds of shapes, whereas if you write with something like this, let's try to write, and it actually works reasonably well. So therefore, the assumption that it also would work reasonably well if I actually buy one of these, just not permanent, is, I think, not totally based not on evidence. So this could be a potential graphic I could use in one of my potential future videos. So now, this is pretty standard. But now if you write the same thing with a marker that actually has a tip that is not a square, but a rectangle, then you can alter what tip you are writing on. And therefore you have at least the possibility to create something that is a little bit more stylized. Of course, it doesn't look the best if I look like this all day long. So therefore, of course, there need things to be optimized. So let's just say I would start the video again, and I just now take the back, which is very convenient because I can do this, and therefore I also have two sides until I need to wipe it off. But I of course can do this off screen and just stop and start the video by clicking the stop and start button. So now, what if we had something that wasn't very expensive, that also was not, or didn't require any paper waste, but also was not really digital. So you would have the haptics of something like this, but with the benefit of this being wipeable, basically. So what if you took a non-permanent marker, your standard sheet of paper block, and then you would apply something like the foil here, and instead of having one of these flip charts, which you usually see at the grocery store, which of course doesn't make sense, but these are the flip charts, and instead of buying one of these and explaining this thing and also having this thing, and therefore being less likely to travel and so on, what if you just had this very small little thing, one single marker, and you just could explain things. You could then explain these things down here, or at least draw these things down here, and then additionally, if you are accommodated to this already, what you can do then is just draw this, and then your face would still be in focus, and your face is probably the most engaging feature you have in terms of engagement. Therefore, having both in the same here would make sense. Of course, you could also argue that you could have kind of a flip situation where you flip it down and then you potentially flip it up, maybe writing mirrored or not. So if I only had one, I could just flip it up and flip it down again, right? Flip it up again instead of holding it like this. So let's actually try this. Okay, it's down, and then it would be mirrored, obviously, and then I could show it here. And if I now additionally would have this as a fixed kind of block, so if I would go for not cartoon but for cardboard actually, for the whole thing, and would make this even more grippable, then I could just have this on the bottom. And what this allows me to do is now to move my hand much calmer, basically, because the whole thing is much calmer and I do not have two variables I need to constrain, basically the one hand here and the other hand here, but this one is constrained and therefore it is much easier to now but point towards something. Additionally, what you also can do is use a pointer such as a pen, which is even more precise and allows you to draw, not to draw, but to see the thing actually that is on there without the hand obscuring the vision. And that's a very, actually turns out to be quite nice idea I had a few minutes ago. And that could be a potential very cheap, low budget basically, and also non-digital solution that still provides the haptics of writing and actually showing it, and actually also kind of the feeling of just writing something and then showing something without the paper waste.